The lofty Oregon Cascades, near radiantly blue Crater Lake, rise the headwaters of the Rogue River. Gliding through forest and meadow, it gains momentum as it tumbles over rock and soil, then broadens out in the valley below. Here it winds sedately through cultivated landscapes before crashing through the pinched ramparts of a 100-mile rock canyon in the heart of the Siskiyou Mountains. Descending ever downward, it flattens out and pools in level terrain, then succumbs to the final briny embrace of the sea. Located in southwestern Oregon, the Rogue River empties into the Pacific Ocean at Gold Beach, Oregon, some 210 miles from its source. Today, portions of the Rogue are not much different than they were 150 years ago. People from across the United States and around the world come to experience the pristine beauty, the abundant wildlife, the thrilling excitement that is the Rogue. But by far, the most popular recreational use of this river are the jet boats that effortlessly skim passengers along its ancient course. The official U.S. mail boats are the original Rogue River boat line and the most popular attraction on the river. This is their story. It begins after the gold rush and the Indian Wars of the 1850s, when pioneers living along the Rogue began seeing themselves as a community. Most of these self-reliant souls originally moved to the Rogue country for the solitude. The land was fertile and life was good in those early days. But for some, the isolation became too much. They longed for word from family and friends. As the Rogue's reputation spread, newcomers moved further and further upriver to find level homesteads. This only increased the seclusion and the distance to the nearest post office at Gold Beach. Of course, people would post and pick up mail for themselves and their neighbors whenever they traveled to town on the Rogue River Trail. But those trips were few and far between. And for all their good intentions, letters and packages often wouldn't reach their destination for weeks, months, even a year later, or sometimes not at all. Elijah Price, an early settler on the Rogue, set out to do something about it. At the repeated pleadings of his wife Alice, Price began writing the U.S. Post Office Department in 1883. He proposed a permanent mailboat route from Gold Beach, 40 miles upstream, to Big Bend, the site of his homestead. The Postmaster General eventually replied that the idea was simply not financially practical. But Price was as persistent as the river by which he lived and kept up the correspondence for 2 solid years. Hoping to rid themselves of this annoyance out in Oregon, the postal authorities finally made an offer they thought would be refused, something that would end this river mail nonsense for good. In 1895, they authorized a trial mail route, weekly delivery for 1 year, but at absolutely no pay. Much to their amazement, Elijah Price agreed, and the Rogue River mailboats were born. The first post office was at Price's homestead at Big Bend. He called it Ilahi, taken from a Chinook Indian word meaning beautiful land. The first mailboat made the run from Gold Beach to Ilahi on May 10, 1895. It took nearly 4 days. The 18-foot double-ended cedar boat was rowed, sailed, and poled in the ever-changing river conditions. In rough, rocky water, the pilot actually got out and pulled the boat by rope, a procedure called lining. Passengers began hitching rides with the mail almost from the beginning. The fare was 50 cents one way, $1 for a round trip. If they were able, passengers were expected to help pole the boat over the shallows. All of the early mailboats carried 2 or 3 extra poles specifically for this purpose. Today, while letters and packages are still delivered to residents upstream by mailboat, it's passengers that are the primary cargo. They ride in sleek, state-of-the-art jet boats. These modern craft draw only a few inches of water and speed along at 30-plus miles per hour. They navigate the shallowest riffles and the strongest rapids with ease, thanks to the expertise of the mailboat pilots. These seasoned natives of the Rogue River area are Coast Guard licensed and expert boatmen. To them, the twists and turns, the rocks and rapids of this river are like the well-thumbed pages of a favorite book. They know every passage intimately. As guides, they excel at locating and pointing out the river's features, the bountiful wildlife, the unique trees, the colorful flowers that populate the banks of the Rogue. They pride themselves on their in-depth knowledge of the area's rich history, taking great delight in the retelling of whimsical Rogue lore. They understand they are part of this ever-changing river's continuing song. The most popular mailboat cruise is the 64-mile Postman's Journey to the town of Agnes and back. It's the trip that established mailboats on the Rogue and made them famous. The Postman's Journey begins as the boat leaves the dock in the shadow of the Isaac Patterson Memorial Bridge and eases upriver. In the lower river, near Mailboat Island, fresh and saltwater mix. Sea lions sun, and harbor seals frolic, while pelicans and cormorants search for an easy meal in this food-rich estuary. Cruising the main channel, a prominent landmark soon appears. Elephant Rock, christened by the crew of the seagoing schooner Samuel Roberts in 1850, it was probably named more for its huge size than any fanciful resemblance to a pachyderm. No one knows which European first saw the Rogue, or when. Spanish, English, and Portuguese ships explored the Oregon coast during the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Some surely anchored near the mouth of the Rogue, while others ventured up its channels. Coins from those eras have been found as far as 60 miles upstream. As the mailboat powers further upriver, Lobster Creek Bridge and Massacre Rock slowly materialize. The creek was named for the abundance of crayfish savored by the pioneers. Now the egret and great blue heron stalk amid the grasses of River's Edge, watching, waiting until the time is right, their prey totally unaware of imminent disaster. Massacre Rock is the site of an Indian ambush. But contrary to conventional stereotypes, it was a group of white settlers who attacked 2 canoes of Native Americans. They killed everyone on board out of revenge for a previous Indian raid on Gold Beach. The only problem was they raided the wrong group of Indians. The Rogue is protected as a wild and scenic river by a 1968 Act of Congress. Lobster Creek marks the beginning of the designated wild and scenic section. Here, black-tailed deer peer cautiously from the brush at River's Edge, in stark contrast to river otter that romp in sheer abandon like children on summer vacation. A little further upstream, the river begins to narrow. The mountains become steeper. Suddenly, it's canyon country. About 16 miles upstream from the mailboat dock lies abandoned Lowry's Lodge. Englishman James Lowry first homesteaded this site in 1866. Lowry's Clearing, as it was called, supported a settlement of 6 families by 1898. During the early period of the mailboats, a full day was spent reaching the town of Agnes. Passengers stopped for lunch at Lowry's Lodge on the way upstream and again on the return trip downstream. Lowry's closed its doors forever in 1959. In less than a year, the new mail service had become enormously successful. The U.S. Post Office Department was so impressed with the dedication of those early pilots, they decided to make the mailboat route permanent. The first contract was awarded in March of 1896 to rogue pioneer Jim Thornton. For $600 per year, he would make 1 mail run per week. At the time, a stamp for a first-class letter cost 2 cents. Fourth